The old man's voice was shaky when he said it, and his eyes were like two moons, wide and terrified. I'll never forget the way his hands trembled as he clutched his walking stick, his voice barely more than a whisper. At the time, I thought he was exaggerating, just spinning another one of his dark tales to scare the young ones. But now I know the truth. It all began with Kofi, my cousin. Kofi was the pride of our family and our village. He was tall and strong, with a presence that drew people in. Men wanted to be him, and women wanted to marry him. He was always the loudest laugh at the fire, the hardest worker on the farm. His charm was effortless, his confidence unshakable. One evening, Kofi went to fetch water from the river. It was late, darker than anyone liked to admit. You see, in our village, we all knew that the river was not just a source of life. It was a boundary between the world we understood and the one we didn't. The elders often warned us, don't go to the river after dusk. That's when the spirits come out. But Kofi was never one to listen to warnings, especially those he thought were superstitions. That night, he didn't come home. At first, no one was overly concerned. Maybe he had stayed with a friend or decided to sleep in the forest. He'd done that before. But when the sun rose, and there was still no sign of him, people started to worry. By the time the men of the village began to search, Kofi walked out of the forest on his own. He was barefoot, his shirt damp and clinging to him. His eyes were distant, unfocused, like he was looking at something far away. "What happened to you?" his mother cried, rushing to him. Kofi just smiled, but it wasn't the smile we knew. It was soft, dreamy, almost unnatural. "I met her," he said. "Met who?" someone asked. "The woman in the river," he replied, his voice full of wonder. We all thought it was a joke. Someone even laughed and clapped him on the back. "Oh, so Kofi's found himself a river wife," they teased. But Kofi didn't laugh. Instead, he described her. She was the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Her skin glowed like the moon, and her hair was dark and long, flowing like the river. When she spoke, her voice was like a song. The laughter faded as people realized he wasn't kidding. His eyes were so sincere, so filled with something none of us could understand. His mother tried to pull him aside, but he shook his head and walked away, back to their hut. In the days that followed, Kofi changed. He stopped spending time with us. He stopped working on the farm. Every evening, he went to the river, no matter how much his mother begged him to stop. "She's waiting for me," he would say, his voice full of longing. One night, I decided to follow him. I'd had enough of the whispers and the uneasy looks people were giving him. Kofi was family, and I couldn't stand by while he drifted further and further away from us. I stayed hidden among the trees as he made his way to the riverbank. The moon was full, casting its light on the water, and for a long time, nothing happened. Kofi just sat there, staring at the river. I was beginning to think he had lost his mind when she appeared. She rose from the water like a shadow becoming solid. Her skin did glow, just as he'd said, and her hair shimmered in the moonlight. She was beautiful, but not in a way that felt natural. Her beauty was sharp, almost painful to look at, as if it wasn't meant for human eyes. Kofi stood up and walked toward her. They spoke, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. Then she laughed, and the sound sent a shiver down my spine. It was too sweet, too perfect. She pulled him into the water, and for a moment, I thought he was drowning. But he came up laughing, his arms around her. The next morning, I told the old man what I had seen. His face went pale, and he grabbed my arm, his voice low and urgent. "She's a mummy water," he said. "A water spirit. They lure men in with promises of love and beauty, but they are not like us. They don't understand the way we do. And when their promises break," he didn't finish. I wanted to warn Kofi, but he wouldn't have listened. He was in love, or something like it. Every moment he wasn't at the river, he was distracted, his eyes distant, his smile strange. Then, one day, he came back from the river looking triumphant. "She's carrying my child," he announced to the village. "I'm going to be a father." The whispers started immediately. The elders called a meeting, pulling Kofi aside to warn him. "This is not natural," they said. "A child between a spirit and a man, it's against the balance of the world." But Kofi wouldn't listen. "She loves me," he insisted. "And I love her. This is a blessing." The elders begged him to stay away from the river, to think of his family and his future. But Kofi was stubborn. "You don't understand," he said. "This is my family now." Then the night came when everything fell apart. I was in my hut when I heard the screams. They were sharp and filled with terror, cutting through the stillness of the night. I grabbed the lantern and ran toward the sound, my heart pounding. When I reached the river, I saw Kofi kneeling in the water, cradling something wrapped in leaves. It was small, unmoving, and even from a distance, I knew it was the child. The woman, no, the spirit, stood a few feet away, her dark eyes fixed on Kofi. Her voice was calm but cold, cutting through the night air like a blade. "You promised me life," she said. Kofi was crying, his voice trembling as he begged her to forgive him. But she didn't move. She raised her hand, and the water around him began to swirl, rising like it had a will of its own. I don't know what came over me, but I ran forward and grabbed Kofi, pulling him away from the river. The spirit didn't follow, but I could feel her eyes on us as we stumbled back to the village. The next day, Kofi fell ill. His body burned with fever, and he kept mumbling her name over and over again. The healer tried everything, but nothing worked. By the third day, he was gone. After the funeral, the old man told me the full story. "When a man and a spirit have a child, it's not meant to live," he said. "The river can't hold it, and the land won't take it. The child becomes a curse, a balance that must be paid with a life." The river hasn't been the same since. Some say they've seen her, standing in the shallows, waiting for someone foolish enough to come close. Others say they've heard her voice on the wind, soft and accusing. And at night, when I lie awake, I can still hear her words, haunting me. "You promised me life."
Did you enjoy the story? If you did, please give us a like, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to comment, let us know what you think about this story, and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you.